gaming is an area where you really have to zoom out a little bit and look at all of the data and then make some conclusions and some recommendations because there are thousands and thousands of games. So there's really something for everyone. And not all games are the same. And as two examples I would give you is maybe playing a crossword puzzle to kind of doing a crossword puzzle to ease boredom could actually be constructive to learning and thinking versus sitting alone in a basement as a 13-year-old boy in a first person shooter game, unconnected to any other humans online or offline. Those are two very different gaming situations. So that's point number one. Point number two, one of the things that impacted me as I was researching, one of the things that impacted me as I was researching the relationship between video game usage and mental health is unlike lung cancer and smoking cigarettes, where there was a direct relationship between the amount of cigarettes consumed and the portion of the population consuming them and rates of lung cancer. Directly proportional. We now know that smoking cigarettes increases your risk of lung cancer 40 times over someone who does not smoke. Believe it or not, we did not see the same relationship as more and more people were doing video games and participating in video games, and that industry exploded from a niche industry to now a global multi-billion dollar industry. We just didn't see skyrocketing rates of ADHD, loneliness, and other problems. We did see increases, and we've talked about those increases, but it doesn't quite match the level of penetration. So that tells us something. The other thing that we've learned is that people who play video games with friends, and even my own children, when they're playing video games, I encourage them to be in the same room and play against each other because there's a social component to that. And there's a lot of yelling and screaming and joy and anger and you did this and you did that. One of my other favorite video games is the cooperative games. So there's a game where my boys like to play and they're climbing up these mountains and they have these ropes and picks and all these other things and they have to help each other. That actually has a very interesting social dynamic too. So video games are really complex because there are so many of them, and we have to think about them in a broader context. Because I will also tell you there are case reports of people who have become highly addicted to video games to the point where they don't eat and they don't drink. And I tell the story in the book. There was one young boy who played for over 24 hours straight without eating or drinking, and he died as a result. So you could see this complex and nuanced view of video games ranging from potentially healthy and a normal part of development to potentially dead. Yeah, another finding in the literature is if you allow young boys in particular, because let's face it, young girls tend to be attracted to social media, and young boys tend to be attracted to video games. When you look at the research on violent video games, there you do start to see a negative relationship, meaning the more young boys in particular spend time with violent video games, the more likely they are to do microaggressions in the school, to have negative attitudes towards other people, particularly to other girls, and to be at a slight increased risk of violent behavior. So that's something that we also have to pay attention to as we make recommendations for smartphone technologies and all technologies and video games in particular. Well, in the book, I quote the great developmental psychologist Eric Erickson, who said, "In the teenage years, there are only two questions that teenagers seek to answer: Who am I, and how do I fit in? Who am I, and how do I fit in?" And one of the challenges I think we have with social media platforms, particularly when you're on multiple ones, is that we're presenting a very different version of ourselves often on that platform than we are at home or with certain friends. And I worry the ability to do that so easily, literally with a few clicks of a button, is going to have an impact on people's ability to see themselves as authentic people and to find their place in the world in a healthy way. Well, I think what we're seeing today is a very highly polarized society where algorithms present information in a way that's very reinforcing of pre-existing ideas or certain inclinations, right? So whether that's politics, so-called Democrats and Republicans, or young girls who are trying to lose weight being exposed to diets and ways in which they can actually young girls who are looking to lose weight are given algorithmically recommendations for extreme diets and other types of stimuli that can actually put them at higher risk for eating disorders. So I think the risk here is that in environments where extreme behavior is what typically breaks through, or extreme views is typically what breaks through, people will be extreme. We know from social experiments that go back decades that negative news travels faster than positive news. So there's really an emphasis on headlines that are negative or more polarizing than really reality suggests it is. So my concern is that people get a very biased, negative, and jaundiced view of reality. And that's not healthy for society. Well, it's not just a function of self presentation, it's also the feedback we get. So, one of the studies I highlight in the book is a study where they took young people and they had them bring some photos of friends and family members, just headshots. And then they took a bunch of stock photos of strangers, people, and randomly assigned a number and put it at the bottom corner of the photograph and put people on brain scanners and basically said, just look at the pictures. Oh, and by the way, the number represents the number of likes that that photograph got. And independent of whether it was someone they knew or someone they didn't know, whether that person was attractive or unattractive or any variable, just the number of likes triggered the reward centers of the brain. The higher the number, the more likely the reward centers were to fire. So this is how we also know that social addicting. This is how we also know that social media is literally addictive. It's triggering the reward centers of the brain, but that feedback that's instant on the number of likes and the number of views creates a very clear social metric, which we've never had in the million years of our evolution until recently. And that's one of the concerns I have, that exposing young people to that kind of feedback so constantly and so easily can be very challenging from a human growth and human personality and human identity perspective.